In the heart of southern Africa in the year 2014, the streets of Harare, Zimbabwe carried the weight of quiet desperation, the air thick with heat dust and the hum of engines from taxis and police cars. In the city center, gold was the lifeblood of the nation, and those who moved it from mine to vault knew its value not only in money, but in power. The story begins in the narrow corridors of a government security agency where whispers of a transport run began to spread. A shipment of raw gold, worth over $20 million, was to be moved from the reserve bank to the refinery on the outskirts of the city. The transfer routine, or so it seemed among the men assigned to guard the convoy, was a veteran officer named Chamu Moyo, respected, loyal, quiet, but behind that silence a plan had begun to take form. Years of watching others grow rich while he struggled to pay rent and feed his family had carved a hollow space inside him, one that greed was eager to fill. The gold was temptation, and he began to gather a small circle of men from the police force, men like him, men who knew the weight of poverty and the scent of opportunity. Together, they plotted not for days, but for months, studying the routes, the schedules, and the weak points of the armored convoys. They learned when security cameras blinked, when roads were least patrolled, and which officers could be bought for silence. The morning of the robbery came like any other. The armored trucks gleamed in the sunlight, lined up at the central bank. The guards climbed in, weapons, polished radios. Checked Shamu stood near the front, nodding at his commander, pretending to listen to the usual briefing. The convoy rolled out through Samora Machel Avenue toward the industrial area. Dust rising behind their tires, the city buzzed, unaware that history was about to be written in betrayal and gunpowder at a quiet intersection in Masasa. Two unmarked vehicles blocked the road, one in front, one behind the convoy. It happened fast, a burst of gunfire from the side, a flashbang explosion. The lead driver blinded and disoriented before he could even radio for help. Within seconds, the men in police uniforms swarmed the trucks, yelling orders that sounded official enough to confuse the real guards. Hands went up, radios hit the ground, and in less than 5 minutes, the back doors of the gold truck were open, glinting bars and raw nuggets packed in brown crates, each worth more than a lifetime of wages. They loaded the loot into a waiting truck, marked with false police insignia, and sped off down a service road into the industrial maze of Harare. The entire operation timed to the heartbeat, precise and ruthless. By the time the sirens began to wail, the robbers had vanished into the network of warehouses that stretched toward the outskirts of Mavuku. There they switched vehicles, burned the uniforms, and disappeared into the sprawl of the city. The headlines broke before sunset, 20 million in gold, gone without a trace. A nation stunned, the reserve bank, silent, the police furious and humiliated. For days the city turned into a fortress, roadblocks everywhere, men in uniforms questioning drivers, searching cars. The people whispered of corruption, of betrayal, of insiders who had sold their souls for a taste of gold. One officer who had been near the convoy broke under pressure and told investigators he had seen familiar faces among the attackers. Faces from their own ranks. Arrests followed, but the gold itself had vanished into thin air. Some said it had crossed the border into Mozambique, hidden in trucks carrying scrap metal. Others swore it was melted down into smaller pieces and flown out through private airstrips under the watch of powerful men. As the weeks turned into months, bodies began to appear. A guard found shot behind a warehouse. An informant found burned in his car. An accountant from the refinery disappeared on his way home. The deeper investigators dug, the more dangerous the trail became, until the case itself was quietly buried. No official statement, no recovery, no justice. Just silence. The kind of silence that money can buy.
Chamumoyo, the man who had orchestrated it all, lived like a ghost for 2 years, changing homes, names, and friends. He spent the money carefully building small businesses through proxies, opening car washes, taxi companies, and hardware stores. No one looked twice at the quiet man in a suit who seemed to be doing well for himself. But greed has a way of whispering too loud one night. In 2016, a journalist investigating corruption in Zimbabwe's gold trade received an anonymous tip about a former officer-turned-businessman who had recently purchased a mansion outside Harare. The reporter followed the lead, tracing property records back to Shamu's name. Within weeks, rumors spread that the gold from the Great Harare heist had resurfaced. A police raid came before dawn. Armored trucks surrounded his compound, lights flashing, men shouting orders. Shamu surrendered without a word, his eyes calm, as if the ending had been written long before the search of his property revealed weapons documents and traces of melted gold. The government hailed it as a breakthrough. The newspapers called it the arrest that redeemed the nation. But the truth was darker and more complicated, for though they caught the man, they never found more than a fraction of the missing fortune. Shamu's confession was partial, cold, and careful. He named no accomplices and hinted that much of the gold had already been moved offshore years ago. When asked where it went, he said only one thing: "It's not lost, it's just been converted into silence." His words echoed across the courtroom, haunting the judges and reporters who listened to a man who had stolen a fortune, but seemed empty of any satisfaction. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison, but behind the walls of Chikurubi, the whispers continued. Some said he lived better than most outside. Some said powerful people still visited him quietly in the night. Years later, rumors resurfaced that parts of the stolen gold appeared in transactions in Dubai and South Africa. The fingerprints of the robbery stretching beyond borders into a web of smuggling syndicates. The trail cold, the evidence washed clean. Yet the story refused to die. It became legend, the Great Harare Gold Robbery. A tale told in bars and police academies and mining towns and border posts. A reminder of how greed and desperation can make even the most trusted men dangerous. The gold never truly disappeared. It simply changed form, shifting from bars to rings, from vaults to bank accounts, from dust to wealth that funded campaigns and built homes in the hills overlooking the same city it was stolen from. And every time a shipment of gold leaves the mines today, the guards look a little harder. Check their radios twice and remember the day when a nation's fortune rolled down the road and vanished into the sun. The Great Harare Gold Robbery is more than a story of crime. It is a mirror reflecting the thin line between loyalty and hunger, between justice and corruption, between man and the gold that shines too bright to ignore. And somewhere out there, maybe buried deep beneath the dust of time, a few of those bars still gleam quietly, waiting for their story to end.